Hello and welcome to the Scottish Youth Work Podcast, the show that delves into everything that's amazing in the world of youth work in Scotland. I'm your host, Kenny Cameron, and tonight I'm going to be delving and discussing the benefits of youth work in education. I'm very lucky tonight to be joined by Lewis Garrity. Lewis is a guy I'm proud to call a friend and a colleague. He's someone with huge and vast experience of delivering youth work in both primary schools and high schools in North Edinburgh through his work at the Spartans Community Foundation. Lewis, thanks for coming on and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kenny. It's nice to be here and looking forward to chatting about youth work and education. So yeah.
Well, we're really lucky, Lewis, because as I mentioned, you've got huge experience in both the primary and secondary sectors, as well as that informal education that happens through youth work. But just for the listeners, can you tell us a wee bit about your background? What were you involved in youth work when you were younger, and how did you wind up being youth work as your career?
Yeah, so growing up, I went to a youth club at Royston Wardipper Community Centre, and that was kind of like every Tuesday night I'd go along with my friends from school, and we'd pretty much just muck about and play. And obviously at the time didn't realise what was happening with the youth work and stuff, but as I get older and look back now, I kind of see the impact that had, and having that safe space to play with my friends was really important growing up. So yeah, and then as I got a bit older, my dad used to help out with taking the pitch out to Pilton with you. So from there, I kind of went on with my dad as a participant. And then as I got older, I started volunteering at Spartans, things like that. And then just kind of developed into when I was leaving school, it was youth work was something I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to have a job at Spartans. And that's where I still am now, and very grateful for that opportunity.
In school, and that's been in both primary and secondary school. I know that this week in particular, YouthLink Scotland has been focusing a lot on youth work and education. They've been hashtagging education needs youth work. There's been some fantastic examples that they've been sharing on their social media this week. If you can, check it out. Some great examples. Fair Scotland have been doing some great work. Braidhurst High School showing some examples. But we know that Scotland's got a unique educational landscape, Lewis. It's different to the rest of the UK, it's different to Europe, it's different to the rest of the world. It's been something that we've had a lot of pride in over a number of years. But how do you see youth work playing a role in shaping the educational experience for young people in Scotland, Lewis?
Yeah, I think there's massive opportunity there, and I think it's something the education sector really needs to look at. From my experience of working within schools, it's always been positive in terms of the relationship you build with young people and the ways in which you can work together to help young people settle within school, but also achieve goals and move forward. So I think it's a massive opportunity and something that needs to be worked together to make happen more often.
Tell us, what's the types of things that you do with young people when you're in the schools? Let's focus initially on the primary schools. What's the type of things that you do, and why do you do it?
Yeah, so when working within the schools, I deliver one-to-one sessions, some small group work, and a lot of that's like focus based. So a lot of it might be based on emotions, team building, helping them develop confidence and friendship. But also, I think a little bit of it is just trying to bring some enjoyment to some young people's time at school. So there's young people who go to school and don't particularly enjoy being in the classroom, find it tricky in the playground. So it's trying to find a space for them to ultimately enjoy it and ensure that they do want to come to school and they don't want to drop out. And
I know from speaking to young people myself, you'll often hear young people say that the youth worker, or that key youth worker, is the person that helps them come to school. And when we look at attainment in Scotland, and how youth work can play a part, that's going to play a part, Lewis. If you've got that key relationship with somebody and you're keen to get in just to see them, surely that would then impact on attainment.
yeah, totally. I think especially for your high tariff kids, I think a lot of them will go to school and sometimes no one at school will be really wanting to see them or want them to be there, but ultimately having that youth worker there maybe gives them a reason to go, and knowing that someone's there who they can chat to, someone's there who they can see, and genuinely who wants them to be there for the right reasons. So yes, I think it's massive just having that youth work approach in the school as well, because you can also do things differently to the way teachers do, which we're very lucky to be able to do that.
the relationship you touched on there is obviously different between a youth worker and a young person than it would be with a teacher and a young person, or a person maybe seen more as a authoritative figure. What is the difference, Lewis, and how do you cultivate that? How do you make that relationship develop?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's starting from where the young person's at. Uh, so working out where they're at, what support they need, but also just you're not Mister This, Mrs. That. You're Lewis, as you'll know, you're Kenny as well when doing it. So I think that's a positive start already. And the kids also see you up at Spartans, out and about, so they have more of a connection with you rather than their teacher who they just see in the classroom, teaching them maths, teaching them English, things like that. So I think the fact that they get to see us out and about doing other stuff with them, like maybe delivering youth clubs at Spartans or being at their homework clubs, it gives them more of a connection to us and their teachers.
Yeah, I think that's massive what you've touched on there. When I was thinking of this earlier, and I'm thinking, obviously, I've got my own experiences working in primary schools and secondary school, delivering youth work. But I think that's one of the key things for me. When you're in school, it's a finite amount of time. Schools will often talk about when they're trying to address social issues or potentially challenges at home, or other things that young people are facing. They've got a finite amount of time to do that. There's 30 odd young people potentially in their class. The curriculums, you know, the curriculum for excellence is great, but there's still a curriculum that's prescribed to young people. But what you have when you've got a youth worker in a school, I think, is you've got that relationship during the school day where things maybe, if things are going great, you can really be celebrated. If things aren't going quite so well for you, you can you can work with somebody what they want, and you can work through that. To you might have been really struggling. You can then have that support to regulate, but you've then seen that same face after school. You're then seeing that face in the evening. You're then potentially seeing that same face, that trusted person on the weekend. So naturally, that having that consistency of values and that safe space is going beyond the school. And how do you think that the relationship you build in the school can help that youth work participant relationship, or youth work young person relationship in the youth club setting, going into the residentials and supporting the young person, going further into their life and helping them move forward?
Yeah, I think there's just that extra element of trust because they know that if they've had a tricky moment at school, you've maybe been there to have their back or been there to support them if they're upset or sad. So I think just having that different setting in school as well is a very good way to build a relationship because as I say, you see them at school and as we just discussed, you might see them later on after school at a youth club or whatever. And it's still you're still the same person, but they can kind of see you in a different way if that makes sense. Because in school you've got to be a bit more formal, a bit more with them. But when you're out of school, you can have that laugh, but you can also do that within school as well. And it's just finding that balance to support the young person best as possible.
No, absolutely. I think we both sing for the same hymn sheet in terms of seeing the real benefits. Um, Obviously, having youth work in school, but what challenges? Every system has got challenges, right? What are some of the challenges youth work faces in Scottish education, Lewis, and how could they be addressed in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that actually being accepted within the education sector. And I think at Spartans we're very lucky that our local primary schools do want to be involved with us and do want us working with them together within the schools. But I know across Scotland that's not always the case. So I think generally having that more accept more accepting of what youth work is and how it can actually benefit the young people. But also I think like the way that we work together could be a lot better with other people.
Yeah, that's what's going to come at the next in terms of collaboration. You're talking about how we better work with other people, and I think that you know everything works better when everybody's working better together. I think you're right in that regard, right? But in what ways do you think youth workers and formal educators can collaborate better, or more for the benefit of the young people that we work with?
I think if there was more communication back and forth, I think it'd be a lot more useful. So I know, for example, if I was to go into one of the schools I work in, that I would pop in and see the head teacher right away, and she'd inform me if there's anything I need to know of any of people I'm working with, which is obviously very useful because then I know how their day was yesterday, what they've been, if there's anything I can support them with, or if there's anything that they found tricky over the last couple of days that maybe we can have a little chat about and try and delve deeper into to see if there's something going on or whatever. So I think having that communication and a lot of it's trust. So like actually trusting you to get on with and do what you do. I think that's massive within the sector and within working in schools because some people like being hands on, but I think with this approach and the way that youth work works, you can't always be hands on with a youth worker. You need to let them go and do what they do. You can't be there watching over their back, keeping yeah, you can't be there all the time. You need to let them work with the young people and build relationships, and then from there you see the vast benefits once the relationships are developed. So yeah.
So how do you build that, Lewis? So in your experience, you say you've went into a school, you're just in there, they don't really know you, because what I'm thinking is we're lucky, we've both seen the benefit of youth work in a primary school for a number of years, and we've seen the benefit to the school, but more importantly we've seen the benefit to the children and young people. But if you were a school, if you were a formal education setting, and you've never engaged in youth work, you don't really know what it is, how do you build that trust? How do you build it with that the head teacher or the key teacher that you're working with can just let you get on with what you're doing? What would your advice be there in that regard?
I think ultimately it's just understanding that we're all there for the same reason. We're all trying to support the young people best we can. And although we've got different approaches and we might go about things slightly differently, the end goal's still the same. And the support we can give the young people through having youth workers in schools would be massive. And I think there's real benefit to it.
Yeah, I think you're right. The vast majority of teachers we know care about the young people they work with as well, and I think where we're lucky is that we're able to just have that relationship in a slightly different way. Sometimes I think we as youth workers are able to, if a young person is having a tough time or a bad day, we're able to get under the bonnet a bit more because
Yeah,
we can literally take the young person out of the class and we can sit. And if we've got that relationship, we can ask them probing questions. Once you've obviously checked in, how you doing, me man? What's happening? What's up? But you can probably delve that wee bit deeper during the school time than perhaps a teacher could, just because obviously they've got 26, 27, maybe 30
yeah,
young people
totally.
in the classroom. So no, I think you're right, but I think it's important. Again, we know the benefits, Lewis, but it is important. But we have to show up and we have to show the impact and the benefit. And in what ways have you been able to show impact? So again, you've got that good relationship in some of the schools that you work in, a fantastic relationship, in fact. But in what ways have you been able to evidence the impact? Because that'll always be the caveat. That'll always be the thing that makes it stand or fall. So how have you been able to, evidence the impact that you've had on the children that you've been working with?
I think a lot of it comes back from like support with the teachers in terms of them like noticing changes and also keeping you informed on things that they feel would be beneficial for young people. So, for example, if a teacher comes to you and says, "Oh, this person's really lacking confidence, can we put them in a group to try and build confidence?" Then maybe 6 months down the line, after them being in the group, the teacher might say, "I don't think they actually need that support anymore." So, for me, that's as good evidence as you can get. Is if a young person comes to your group needing confidence, and then after 6 months they don't need that confidence anymore. Maybe they need something else, or maybe there's someone else in the class who's struggling a bit more now. So I think that's a really valuable way to do it. But I think if we also manage to track things like attainment and also people coming into school on a day where a youth worker's in, I think things like that are all really beneficial and are a great way to measure the impact.
No, I think again, we are on the same page here, Lewis. I think absolutely that capturing the data and is important. It goes without saying that if you're in school, you think you've got more of a chance of raising attainment. And we both know countless examples of young people who will say that they've literally, or the parents will say that they've literally come in that day on account of they know they've got their time with you. For
Yeah.
example, they've got their Lewis time, and that's been the deciding factor in the morning when they're getting up, where they might have challenged that in the past, but they're excited to go in just on the basis of having that one-to-one time, or whether that's 10 minutes or an hour, or having the chance to invite friends out with them to do some team building activities or whatever. Thinking to high school, though, Lewis, what's the differences? So we've touched on the primary school stuff. What's the differences in terms of youth work in high school that you've noticed, or other differences? And could you explain them, and how would your approach to your practice be different in that regard?
I think when working in high school, it's a bit more high schools are a bit more relaxed than primary schools in terms of having young people actually being out and about more often. So, for example, if you're in a high school, you're probably likely to bump into young people walking around the corridors, not going to class. So I think that there's obviously that aspect of it because in primary school the kids are in one classroom all day, but high school they have more freedom to do that. So I think you see more kids out and about. I think in terms of the working relation, I don't think too much is different in the way that you go about things and the way you work with young people. But it's all ultimately all about just building good relationships. That's what it all comes back to, and just trying to support young people the best you can.
And how does that relationship and how does that youth work in high school help young people on their journey to whatever that is next, that positive destination? Because ultimately, it's brilliant having young people coming into school and to meet yourself and your colleagues and other youth workers and doing the activities that you're doing with them. But ultimately, in school, the school's trying to get them into a positive destination at the end of that. So, how does the young people working with you, how do you help that happen? How do you help make the young person achieve that goal?
Yeah, I think ultimately the first thing was that the last high school group I worked with was a transition group, so a group of P7, so I've just moved up to high school into S1. And I think the ultimate first thing was trying to make high school a safe place and make them meet new teachers who they can maybe go and chat to if there is problems, or know that once a week you'd be there to be able to support them if there is anything that's going wrong or something that they're finding stressful and tricky. So, but also I think like just trying to foster a safe space is ultimately really important and support them to know that there is people looking out for them and that if they are struggling they can talk to someone and there is always someone within the school who should be able to support them and help them.
Lewis, we've highlighted there, and we absolutely accept and understand the importance and value of youth workers in both primary school and secondary schools. A lot of schools have or have relied on PEF funding in order to have youth work as an offering in the school. What would you say to a head teacher who was swithering whether to use or whether to allocate some of their funding pot for PEF funding or elsewhere away from hiring something that might be more associated traditionally with a school, but actually invest in that into youth work in their school? What would you say to persuade them to do that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that's important is that they start with looking at the young people first and looking at ways in which they can be supported, and obviously supported in school doesn't always have to be academically. So within schools there's a lot of different social and emotional needs, and depending on the areas, it'll be different no matter where you go. But I think ultimately having that extra support for your young people is always a bonus because it's often not until that young person's settled that any learning actually takes place, sorry. So I think having an opportunity to have someone able to support young people there, build relationships, and yeah, just work with the school to try and foster a safe place and a safe relationship is really important.
Lewis, that's been fantastic, and I think as we look to conclude, um, what would you envision for the future of youth work in Scotland?
Yeah, I'd like to hope that it is more well known. It takes place in more schools, and that it is more accepted around the UK and around Scotland. So
Lewis, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your insights into youth work in schools. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on what has been the debut episode of the Scottish Youth Work Podcast. Tune in next time for more episodes where we'll explore the diversity of youth work in Scotland. Until next time, thank you very much.